Hello, this is Miss Yu, support counselor at Amador Valley High School. Today we're going to talk a little bit about stress management. We're going to first talk about stress and a really helpful metaphor for us to look at stress. Then we're going to talk about self-care. And then lastly, coping skills. Answer this question. Do you think you handle stress well? Please watch this video about the stress bucket metaphor.
Stress is usually seen as something we need to avoid. This is not true. We need stress, and we need our body's stress hormone cortisol to rise and fall throughout the day. Stress helps us wake up in the morning, helps us focus, learn, and remember new things. It's when people experience too much stress and start having difficulties coping that stress becomes a problem. High levels of stress can disrupt the natural changes in the body's stress response system and start to affect our physical and mental health. Over time, accumulated stress can result in false FFF response activations. When trying to measure our stress tolerance, the bucket analogy can be helpful. Our stress tolerance, or the size of our bucket, is a product of our genes, personality, and life experiences, and its size varies from person to person. The water in this analogy is the combination of all the stress in your life. We use the coping strategies we have available to keep our bucket from overflowing. They are like taps that allow water to drain from the bucket. Stress can include training, work, school, relationships, finances, moving, changing jobs, or the loss of a loved one. Both positive and negative experiences will affect the water level. A big bucket can hold more water or stress before it overflows. With a smaller bucket, less water is required for the water or stress level to become critical. While you can't change the size of your bucket, you can make life adjustments to reduce water coming in. You can also learn new coping strategies and stress management techniques to allow water to drain out. Mind tools, exercise, quality sleep, relaxation, and sharing your feelings with friends are some examples of effective water taps. Staying up late, sleeping in, drugs, inactivity, procrastination, suppressing or ignoring problems are examples of unhelpful coping strategies or false taps. They might give temporary relief, but actually result in water flowing back into your bucket. This video was created by Brave, Building Healthy Minds. Stress is usually seen.
What is the water tap in this stress bucket analogy? So let's talk about stress a little bit more. It's a common feeling that everyone experiences at times, responding from a demand on the brain and body. It's basically your body's response when it senses danger. It looks different for everyone, and it may also affect people differently. Keep in mind that stress can be a good thing, and it helps us, but too much stress can be harmful to our health and mental well-being. Stress can also negatively affect our body, mind, behavior, and emotions. So it's not just headaches, but it could also be worrying or indecision. Stress can impact us in a variety of ways. That's why it's so important that we have ways to manage our stress levels. In order to help manage our stress, it's important to look inwards and check out your own stress levels. One way to do that is check in with yourself daily. You can use scales such as the ones pictured on this slide. It could be scales with color. It could be scales with facial expressions that convey emotions. It could be like the scale on the bottom that ranges from 0 to 100 with increments of 10 meaning something different. Ask yourself, are we feeling high levels of stress, or are we feeling okay and we don't have high levels of stress? If we are feeling moderate or high levels of stress, we need to start using coping strategies to help reduce our stress levels. Now let's ask this of ourselves right now. On a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the highest level and 1 being the lowest level, what number will you rate your stress level now? When we're talking about stress, it is important to talk about self-care. Self-care is any activity that we do deliberately in order to take care of our mental, emotional, and physical health. Keep in mind, it is a preventative measure. So, what that means is that it's something that we do before we get really stressed out. The goal is to decrease extreme distress and burnout. It can decrease the need for coping strategies in the future. This is something that you do to bring joy in your life and to help you feel calm. It's part of your routine. When we're under a lot of stress, it could be helpful to utilize our coping skills. They're the behavior or activity that helps us get through a tough situation or when we're feeling really stressed. It can help us feel calmer and more centered. Positive coping skills help us manage stress without making a poor choice, which can often make the situation worse. When we're under a lot of stress, we don't spend a whole lot of time thinking clearly and often gets us into sticky situations or may make the problem worse. So it's important that we remain calm and start thinking about what coping skills we can use. Keep in mind, coping skills can be part of our self-care routine, but remember, self-care routine is a preventative measure, whereas coping skills is more of something we do in response to something when we're stressed. But some of these coping skills can be added to our self-care routine, which then makes it more of a self-care activity than a coping skill in that moment. We're going to go over a few types of coping skills. First, it's distraction, and it sounds exactly like what it is. It's just taking our mind off the problem for a while. We can probably distract ourselves from doing a puzzle, reading a book, or doing a Sudoku puzzle. We can even watch our favorite movie or listen to music. But keep in mind, distraction is often temporary, and the stress does tend to come back when we're done distracting ourselves. It's important that we utilize another coping skill on top of distraction. Second, we have self-soothing coping skills. That means we're comforting ourselves through our five senses, and those five senses are touch, hearing, sight, taste, and smell. So we're self-soothing by touching something that brings us comfort, like a stuffed animal or a stress ball. We may be hearing something that brings us joy or helps us feel calm, like our favorite music or a guided meditation video. We're choosing to see something intentionally that brings us joy, like snow falling in our snow globe or happy pictures or memories. Tasting something that reminds us of good memories or helps us feel more calm, like warm tea, or eating a piece of sour candy that asks us to focus on that sour taste rather than the stressful situation. Lastly, it might feel good to smell something we like our favorite scented candle or lotion. We're using our senses here to help us feel better and soothe ourselves. Emotional awareness are tools for identifying and expressing our feelings. Kind of similar to how we use scales to identify our stress levels, these tools help us identify our emotions. We can possibly use a list or a chart of emotions. We could journal or write down our thoughts and feelings and how it feels in our bodies. We can even draw out our own feelings. This helps us be more in tune to our own feelings. Next, we have mindfulness. Mindfulness are tools for centering and grounding yourselves in the present moment. And that could look like meditation and grounding exercises. And lastly, breathing exercises can be helpful too. Opposite action coping skills involves doing something the opposite of our impulse that is consistent with a more positive emotion. For example, writing or reading affirmations or inspirational quotes can be really helpful on those days where we're feeling unhappy or feeling like our self-esteem took a hit. Or we can watch or read something that is funny or cheerful on a day that we're feeling particularly sad and uncheerful. Crisis plans aren't necessarily for the everyday situation, but there could be times when we feel our stress is too much. It's important to have a crisis plan in place beforehand. Create a list of supports and resources for yourself when coping skills aren't enough. Your support can look like family and close friends. You can let them know they're on your crisis plan so they know they need to work together with you to find help when you do reach out. Your support could look like your school counselor or your therapist. It could be hotline numbers like the suicide prevention hotline, the non emergency phone line, or even Pleasanton PD. Keep all these possible supports in mind so that you can easily access it when you're noticing you're in a crisis and the stress is too much. Problem focused coping targets the causes of stress in practical ways, which tackles the problem or the stressful situation that is causing the stress, consequently directly reducing the stress. Examples of problem focused strategies include problem solving, time management, and obtaining instrumental social support. An example of problem solving can look like figuring out how to prepare for an exam that is bringing a lot of stress and anxiety for you. In this situation, problem solving can look like reaching out to your classmates and forming a study group in order to feel more confident and prepare for the exam. It could also look like reaching out to your teacher and letting them know you need some help or need some support on how to study. Time management can look like planning your day and building a routine that helps you feel like you're utilizing your time well, thus reducing the stressors that typically pop up in your day when you start feeling like you don't have enough hours in the day to get everything done. Keep in mind that problem-focused approach may not work in any situation where it is beyond your control to remove the source of stress. It works best when you can control the source of your stress, and not all people can take control of the situation. For example, if you're coping with a loss right now, problem-focused coping probably would be less helpful than the other coping skills we talked about because you don't have control over that loss. Now that we've gone over some coping skills, create a list for yourself. Write down a few that you see yourself doing. Write down a few that you think will work well for you. Keep it in a safe place. It could be on your desktop, on your computer, or your Google Drive, or you can print it out and tape it to your wall. Have it handy for when you recognize you need to use your coping skills. Answer this question: what type of coping skills appeals to you the most? Lastly, I'd like to go over some tips while you're staying at home. As we know, distance learning in this pandemic has not been easy. I hope these tips will help. First, establish a routine, especially on the weekdays, so you know what your expectations are. School looks very different now, but if we have a routine similar to how school was like before, then it'll help us to have some sense of normalcy. Second, stay active and exercise. Now that we're sheltering in place, it's so important for our physical and mental health to stay active. Go outside. Spend at least a few minutes outside for some fresh air. A change in your environment can do you some good, and it can help. Do your homework. I know it sounds silly, but staying on top of schoolwork can help us with stress related to school, since school is often a stressor for students. When things pile up, we feel it. Stay organized so we don't lose track of what we need to do. It also helps to have a plan to help us tackle everything. Do something creative. Use it as an outlet. Change it from just schoolwork. We should stay on top of schoolwork, but it's totally okay to give yourself permission to do something fun and creative as well. Speaking of creative outlets, keep a journal. Journaling could be a great way to be creative, and it helps us with emotional awareness, one of those coping skills we talked about. It helps our thoughts stay organized and a great way to self-reflect. Start a quarantine journal. Reach out to others. It can be lonely during quarantine. Reach out to people that are important to you. Set up weekly Zoom meetings or be intentional about texting or calling people and checking in with them. Eat healthy. It is so important to nourish our bodies right now. It's going through a lot. It's so beneficial for our physical health to make sure we are maintaining nourishment. Listen to music. Fill your ears with what you like to hear. Again, one of the coping skills we talked about. Limit watching the news. This one's tough. I know we usually want to be informed, but sometimes watching the news or hearing about it can be stressful. Set boundaries with how much news you're watching. Doom scrolling probably isn't super helpful for us, especially right before bed. Lastly, remember that this won't last forever. This is a challenging time right now, but it's helpful to remind ourselves that it won't last forever. I know it is easier said than done, but sometimes we need to continue holding on to that hope, like those positive affirmations we spoke about previously. Sometimes we need reminders of that. For more resources, check out our counseling website and our virtual wellness center. They can be found at our Amador website.